The moon is the only satellite of the Earth and the brightest object in the sky at night. The only space feature that man has ever set foot on. It's only thanks to the moon that we have tides, a stable magnetic field, and that life appeared on Earth. But could it happen that the moon would drift out of its orbit and cease to be Earth's neighbor? Or worse, could the moon hit our planet? That's what we're going to talk about today. The collision scenario. Day 1. So, the moon starts gradually approaching the Earth. For the first few days, we don't notice much difference, only that the moon is brighter in the night sky. The most noticeable effect of the moon on Earth is the tide. As it gets closer to Earth, the gravitational pull of the moon will be stronger and stronger, forcing water further and further away at low tide and closer at high tide. The weighted average of the tide is about half a meter high. In the first month, this figure will rise to 4 meters. Already at this stage, cities such as Miami, Amsterdam, partly Tokyo and London. The moon has traveled over 60% of the way to Earth. The height of the tidal waves is 10 to 20 meters. Because of this, almost all major ports are out of order, and famine is starting because of the breakdown of the supply chain. Also, the moon has come close enough to start affecting Earth's orbital constellation. We lose GPS and the remaining telecommunications. Long-haul air traffic stops. If there was an exchange of food and people between military bases, it stops. Supposedly by this time, water will have exhausted its ability to play out the rising gravity of the moon. The Earth's crust itself begins to deform under the influence of the tidal forces. Here's another surprise for mankind. The crust begins to push and crack under the pressure of billions of tons of water where it should not be, and collapse under the pressure from below, where normally water pressure would help keep everything in balance. The Earth's crust has gone to pieces. In addition to floods, we now have earthquakes. Meanwhile, the crumbling crust sets off a chain of eruptions in Yellowstone, Chile, and New Zealand, the ash from which covers the sky, turning day into maroon twilight. And the moon isn't much bigger than usual in the sky. It's the size of an ordinary cloud. And if it were not for the ash clouds, the night wouldn't be much brighter than an average full moon. And then came the day. The moon reaches Roche's limit and the Earth's gravity shatters it, and there are two pieces of news. The good news is that the moon has collapsed and its fragments are orbiting, some of them falling to Earth. The tidal forces that have been acting on the Earth begin to weaken. And the bad news: only 3 possible scenarios. Only one gives humanity a chance. First, lots of debris heats up the atmosphere as it burns up. The final stage of sterilizing the Earth's surface by heating and meteor bombardment begins. The Earth is transformed into a vent for many millennia. The second, lots of large moon fragments bombard the planet, turning it into a lava bowl for 100 years, and we get a sterile obsidian planet. In the third scenario, on the other hand, all seems well. The bulk of the moon's mass would remain in orbit. Water would return to its former domain. The climate will return to what we're used to. And those who survive, given access to the Doomsday Seed Vault, will get a view of the rings instead of the lunar night sky, and the difficult thousands of years of repopulation and struggle for life. The only open question is whether this could happen, and what exactly could move the moon out of orbit around the Earth. Theoretically, it could be caused by some giant space object accidentally invading the solar system. Its mass could have an impact on the relationship between the Earth and the moon, but this is highly unlikely. Large planetary neighbors would prevent this from happening. Logically, for the same reason, a collision between a large object and the moon is unlikely. It would have to be about the same size as the satellite to affect it. But rather they would collapse, and then Earth would have the very chance of getting rings or a group of small moons. But what is the reality? The reality is that our satellite tends not to move closer to us, but gradually away from us. And if we judge very hypothetically, in 65 billion years, the Moon will get tired of moving away from the Earth and will turn back. Then a collision would be inevitable, wouldn't it? Makes sense, but no, because the red giant, which by then will be our Sun, will have already surely destroyed the Earth itself ahead of the Moon. And if you want to see how it might happen, follow this link to our recent video and see what would happen to the Earth if our star were to suddenly explode. Also, please like the video and subscribe to the channel.